Sanjeev Sanyal, a member of the Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council. Thanks very much, Mr. Sanyal, for speaking to us here on NDTV. Most people today are asking the question, why is this being done today? Why couldn't we have just 2 slabs to begin with in 2017 itself?
So, thanks for having me on your show. If you go back to 2017, you have to remember the focus then was to shift the framework. We had this extremely complicated set of taxes that we were replacing, and they simply didn't map one-to-one to anything that we were doing. So there was no attempt at that time to try and go back to first principles and try and understand which tax should apply to which item, because there are literally lakhs of items. If we had tried to do this, in addition to having a completely new system, you would also have very different tax rates for different things. So the decision was taken then that for a period of transition, you would simply take the pre-existing pre-GST tax rates and slot them into whatever was the nearest bucket that could be done, so that the amount of disruption would be the least. And that is basically what was done. Since then, several iterations of changes were done to move things that were clearly in the wrong bucket to the better ones. But over a period of time, it was understood that, look, we needed to, one, have fewer rates and slabs. And the second, that you need to go back to first principles and correlate them to where you want those items to be. So, for example, the cement used to be at 28 because that was what was inherited from the pre-GST period. Now, everybody understood that it may be a bit excessive for something that is so commonly used, but that had been inherited. Now, what is now being attempted is to basically rationalize it from first principles to something that would correlate to where you want it to be based on what the item is.
But why September 2025? Here's the thing. I mean, the argument could be, why couldn't it have taken 3 years? This rationalization that you're talking about, the different changes that you're talking about, why couldn't they be done in 3 years, 5 years? Why did it take 8 years? What I'm trying to understand is, what is that tipping point when you decided now the country is ready for just 2 different slabs?
So there's no right and wrong answer to that. There were many things along the way. First is that for the first couple of years, we were just stabilizing the system. Then remember, we went through 2.5 years of COVID, which is really very disruptive in its own right. And then we came out of that, the system was, and remember, we are still doing changes along the way. It's not like we are continuously making changes, understanding the new things we are finding out about GST that we didn't know. So there are many things that they are doing along the way. Then at some point, you have to come to a stage where you say, let's take that next leap. It cannot be done by the central government. It has to be done by the GST Council. So it requires unanimity among the states as well. And by the way, there is still some grumbling about it, but it was still unanimous. So about a year ago, we began working on this thing of making that new transition. And we have done this now.
I'll talk about those grumblings from the states in just a bit. And the reason why I kept asking you about why now is because Mr. P. Chidambaram has said today, and I quote, "It will be interesting to speculate on what drove the government to make the changes: sluggish growth, rising household debt, falling household savings, elections in Bihar, Mr. Trump and his tariffs, or all of the above." Would you care to attempt that multiple choice question from him?
It's somewhat absurd piece of political rhetoric. First of all, how is growth slowing down? You had 7.8% year-on-year growth in the first quarter. This is a high rate by any standards. I mean, it's not just the highest rate of any major country in the world. It is a very high rate by any standard, 7.8%. Secondly, these things cannot be done because, we are having some debate about tariffs with another country. As I mentioned to you, it took us a whole year to get the consensus, put these literally lakhs of items into the correct boxes, do all kinds of trade-offs. It didn't start just 2 months ago when this Trump tariff thing popped up. And as far as the former finance minister is concerned, if it was all so simple, then they should have done it when they were running the place. They didn't even attempt to create GST. Forget about a simplification. So here is a government that is actually done it, stabilized it, taken it through shocks like COVID, and then has actually implemented the simplification, and now you are accusing them of why didn't you do it faster? Well, why didn't the previous lot do it faster?
Well,
Why didn't they do it at all?
Maybe they didn't, but today they are saying that they have pushed you far enough to be forced to do it. Or in the words of the Congress party, Sarkar tumhari, system hamara. It's because Mr. Rahul Gandhi has been turning the screws on.
If they feel that their recommendations have pushed us in this direction, then I wish they will continue to push us in this direction from the opposition.
Well, actually, they're saying that they deserve the credit. It's the opposition which has literally forced you to finally
come to this. As I said, I hope they will remain such a constructive opposition forever.
Well, that's great show of bipartisanship in that case. But about a few specifics which concern the common man today. Let's talk about health insurance. Should that have happened sooner? At least just the 18% on insurance, because there have been huge protests, not just from the opposition, but even Mr. Gadkari last year had written to the finance minister saying that this is like taxing life's uncertainties. Maybe this would have earned more goodwill if this could have been done away with earlier, like you've done today.
We can always keep arguing that something should be done earlier, but let me tell you, there are many items here with equally compelling reasonings. You reduce taxes is a matter of making huge number of trade-offs. So you have to not only make trade-offs on the items there, you also have to make a conversation, does the economy have enough momentum that when you reduce these things, the economy grows fast enough to compensate for the losses of income that you will have. So you need to time these things. You need to be confident enough that, for example, should there be shortfalls, you have, for example, no major macroeconomic instability in the system that could get exacerbated. As it happens to be, this is a particularly good time to do it because inflation is basically zero or 2% or something like that. But if you take it with WPI, which is negative, it's running very, very low. With this change, it will probably decline further. So now there is macroeconomic space that should there be shortfall of any kind, it will not destabilize the system. The banking system is in good shape. The external sector is in good shape. So, you have to choose these kinds of moments to be able to do this. You can't just make big radical changes anytime you want.
What would be the single biggest outcome that you would hope for from these reforms?
Well, the first and most important thing that you want is that this improves the efficiency of the system. As I said, there were several problems. One, there was multiple rates. Second, the various items were in different buckets, which were simply correlated to whatever had existed pre-GST and not to first principles. So that has been sorted. Third, there were many inversions of rates. So those have been removed. I think the textiles is a particular area where they have benefited from straightening that out. But very importantly, we have done a bunch of process reforms that have not got as much attention as maybe the slabs. For example, there was a lot of grumbling that GST inspectors had reintroduced a sort of inspector Raj of some sort as far as giving out the registration numbers was concerned. So you may have heard that some of the changes yesterday would sort that problem out. At least for 97% of the applicants, they will within 3 days get their number. Similarly, refunds, there were delays. So the process is generally being made more efficient. Why is that important? Well, if you want growth to be sustained over a long period of time, then in that case, what you will find that you need to take out all the friction from this. And really, as far as I'm concerned, the biggest gain from this is simply removing the frictions caused by the tax system. You want to collect taxes, but as Kautilya said, you want to collect taxes in the way a bee collects honey from a flower without disturbing the economy as such. And there were enough accumulation of frictions in the system that now have hopefully been ironed out.
Now, the former Deputy Chairman of the Planning Commission, Montek Aluwalia, has said, and I quote, "The idea of GST was that it would promote compliance and lead to increase in revenue as share in GDP. That has not happened. In fact, purists would advocate for one GST rate. Can this be a possibility in the future?"
Well, that is more complex. We can aspire to it, but I think we have got a decent balance here between two rates, one for most goods and one for what can be called essentials. One could argue that even better to have a single rate. We can see that in the future if the time comes for doing it. But for now, I think this is good enough, and it takes the various trade-offs we made. It does a decent job of the trade-offs.
What is the
As far as the tax to GDP ratio of the country is concerned, actually our tax to GDP ratio has been rising quite steadily over several years. So it's not the case that our tax to GDP ratio has been flat. That's not true.
Okay, so it's the GST has achieved what it set out to do. There's
Yes,
no
it
need for
achieved
pessimism.
set out to be. It simplified the system. It increased the, and by the way, you don't only have to judge it by the indirect tax collections. You should also include the direct tax collections, because one of the points about GST was to improve the data available on the economy so that people paid their income tax and other corporate tax and other things. So that has also improved.
What are the plans, sir, for financial devolution to the states? Because even now, although there is a large consensus in the GST Council, there were concerns, especially in states like Kerala, Tamil Nadu. They are saying that our fiscal autonomy still has challenges. How are they going to be compensated?
So first of all, if the system is better and it expands the economy, which is the idea, then the resources that they have will grow. So there's a distinction between available resources and fiscal autonomy, which is a different issue. You can have lots of resources but without any autonomy. So there are somewhat different issues. So let me tackle them somewhat separately. First of all, the issue of resources, yes, if you cut tax rates, in the first instance, your tax collections will fall, right? That's just the arithmetic. The idea being, of course, that the economy will respond and grow over a period of time to more than compensate for the cuts that you have made. That's the bet you have made. That's also true, by the way, not just indirect tax, also indirect taxes when you lower tax rates, that's, described as Laffer curve or whatever. The idea is you reduce tax rates, the economy more than grows and compensates by giving you more resources. And indeed, the case that we hope that this simplification will stimulate the economy and let it grow. But yes, in the short run, you will get certain amount of drop in collections that could happen if you reduce tax rates. That is to be expected, could last a quarter or two, maybe even longer. But longer term, I'm quite confident that the economy will, given that it is growing at a decent pace. And now what you will see here is that the inflationary pressure, which is already, as I said, now dipped to 2%, with this, it will dip even further. And so you will actually have the space for macroeconomic stimulus that you could stimulate the economy in ways you couldn't when inflation is an issue.
Is this the logic you'll also use to plug the gap in the revenue that you incur with these change in GST rates, or will you be imposing additional cesses there?
No, the idea is not to have additional cesses, although there is a compensatory cess that should roll off this year, as you know. But we'll see how this turns out, if this has a large impact. These things go through iterations, but by and large, what has now been achieved is a radical simplification. How the transition is managed, we will manage it as it comes along.
Now, a small technical point, because there are a lot of automobile aficionados who have wondered what is the logic of having different slabs for things like cars and motorcycles. That 28% slab is applicable, for example, to a very small quantum of sales, which is high-end vehicles. If you were to keep it uniform across, luxury cars and motorcycles and others, wouldn't it actually boost their sales? Why this small differentiation there?
It is indeed a small category, but the fact of the matter is, the idea was that there is to collect some higher level of tax on these items, partly because they are, by the way, higher users of energy, which we import, number one. Two, it allows us to collect some extra tax at the margin from a segment of the society that is not so price sensitive. By the way, before you take another step on this, do remember that the old system had 28% plus compensatory cess. So once you add those two up, they actually go up past 40%. So once there is a roll-off of the compensatory cess, the tax rate on those 40% cars will actually be lower than they were before. Just so that I'd like to point that out. There is, of course, a high 40% tax on gutka and other tobacco and other items, which I am anyway in favor of doing.
Okay,
So,
as a final question,
yeah.
at this time, do you think that these reforms are going to at least uplift the mood, given that and this was not in reaction to the tariffs by America, but it has caused a slowdown. It has affected the diamond industry, the textile industry. Overall, this is going to uplift the mood going into the festive season? There's going to be more spending, more money in the market?
Well, presumably, if you have lower taxes, people feel happier. I don't know. I feel happier. But the fact of the matter is, as I said, they were not done in response to the Trump tariffs.
But is it going to trickle down to the consumer? There's that fear as well. What if somebody makes the insurance policies more expensive, so it doesn't really matter whether we're paying a smaller premium or not?
So that is something to be observed. I mean, if you lower the tax rates, and so that has to feed through, of course. That is one of the expectations that you have. But going back to the earlier point on Trump, let me say that the Trump tariffs came in only 2 months ago. So this kind of thing is not being done in response to that. And as far as the external negotiations are concerned, we have been very clear that we will not escalate the matter, but we will stand our ground. And if we have to stand our ground and protect Indian interests, and it causes some amount of turbulence and friction, then let me also say that the Indian government does have the resources to provide some amount of cushion to this. And we intend to use both the monetary and fiscal space we currently have, thanks to low inflation and macro stability indicators being so well behaved. We will use that space to provide them support.
All right, it's a good beginning, and well begun is half done. As a parting note, what do you make of becoming in addition to, of course, all the hats you wear already, you are the new viral dancing sensation online. Any thoughts on that, Sanjeev, Sanyal, before we let you go?
Well, I have no idea why that went viral, but why not? I happened to be walking past a group of young lads who were dancing to a Ramdhun, and I joined them for about 30 seconds. I have no idea how that went viral, but what the hell, it's good fun.
Well, there are many videos of you now circulating saying every Indian dad ever. So I hope your children approve. Sanjeev, Sanyal, for wearing many hats and excelling at all of them and joining us here on NDTV. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Namaste.